Well, hello and welcome to the January 2023 edition of the ABA Engineering Webinar Series. These webinars are presented each month by the Alabama Broadcasters Association's Engineering Services Division. And I'm Larry Wilkins, your host, along with our co-host, John George. And John, where are you joining us from today? You usually like Willie Nelson on the road somewhere.
Well, I'll leave this afternoon, but I'm actually working out of my office in South Carolina today.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
How's the weather over there?
Starting to drizzle rain, so it'll be a rainy day in South Carolina.
Okay. We want to welcome our sponsor too and thank them for being a part of this program, Max Connect Group. They support this webinar as well as all the other activities that we do with the ABA Engineering Services. Max Connect is a full service broadcast company offering sales and service for all broadcast operations. They sell and support the Max Connect unit, which is a specially designed audio over IP unit that uses a dedicated Wi-Fi channel. If you haven't checked that out, you need to do that. It's great for remotes and STL operations. You can find them online at maxconnect.com. You see the address there, MAXXKONNECT. So many people try to type it in and put a C instead of a K. So you might want to check that. If you do check with them, tell them that you appreciate them sponsoring not only the webinar, but our Engineering Academy classes as well. And on that note, real quickly, before we get into the program, a shameless plug here for our Academy. We offer classes throughout the year. They're week-long classes we do 1 week for radio and a different week for television. And we're actually added another session this year. We've been doing 2 sessions each year, but the attendance has been continually growing. So now we've added a 3rd session that will happen in the during the summer. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can go to our website. It's just go to al-ba.com and click on the engineering tab, al-ba.com, and click on the engineering tab, and it'll give you all the information about our classes. Well, today we've got a very special program on a very important subject, and that is the upcoming changes in the emergency alert system, better known as EAS. All engineers that's on the webinar are or should be aware of the FCC requirements concerning the operation of EAS equipment and being a part of the EAS system. Recently, the Commission issued some changes that were actually designed for a number of different reasons. One was to increase the redundancy, but also the effectiveness of the EAS system. And one of those actually has to do with the Common Alerting Protocol, or as we know it as CAP. And what I've done is what CAP is all about and what they're thinking about doing or want stations to do is CAP actually offers the ability to have more defined information about what the alert is from a national standpoint. And this is very beneficial to television stations because it can actually include pictures, videos as well. But it has a lot more information available, and the quality of the audio, if there's embedded audio, will be much better as well. So rather than John and I trying to muddle through it and tell everybody what's involved and what they need to do to comply with this, we decided to get a hold of 3 of our really good friends with the 3 major manufacturers of EAS equipment. Bill Robinson with DASDEC, Harold Price from Sage, manufacturer the Sage Index, and our good friend Jim Gorman, who manufactures the Gorman Redlick unit. And first of all, we want to thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. And what I would like to do, and we'll just do this sort of in a roundtable type situation, and we'll talk about the different things. And the first one I think we would like to talk about is the CAP polling. Triggered CAP polling and how that's going to work, why it's beneficial, how it's going to affect your operation, and more importantly, how it's actually going to affect the local engineers. So Bill, let's start with you and get your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Actually, I have, and to the point you just originally made, Larry, I have a little graphic if I can pop it up,
Sure, sure.
and I'll just share that real quick. So hopefully you guys can see that
We-
graphic.
Yes, we got it.
So the thing about trigger cap polling, and to your initial point, the amount of information that is accessible is substantial. Now, our device, we actually introduced trigger cap polling back in 2018. Now, there are some changes relative to the FCC rules, and we're going to have to modify a couple of things to bring it in line with their current thing. But what's most important is the idea that a message would come in, and I'm going to kind of do a simple thing with a pen here to try to show it if I can. Just maybe spotlight a little bit, but well, it wants to go through a bunch of other stuff. I won't worry about that then. Sorry about that. It's kind of the Zoom thing that wants to play. But a message that comes in across the EAS system, which is audio, FSK audio, as we all know, is received by the device. And when it receives it, it looks at it and says, hey, I've received my message. Now, in the classic sense, most of the time, the first one in is the first one that wins. That goes to air, whatever is the first one. So in a duplicate situation, if another EAS message or a message even from CAP comes in there and it's identical, if it didn't get there first, it doesn't make it through. But in trigger cap polling, the idea is, hey, let's wait and see if there is a corresponding CAP message that is identical to the EAS message. And really what's important is if that is in fact the case, then the EAS message, the one that came in first, if you will, is DQ'd and the CAP message is played. And this is a perfect example. When you talk about the amount of detail, and this is one of the key elements, whenever you're going to alert somebody, you want to give them actionable information. You want to give them something they can rely on. And if you look at this, this is an actual true emergency. This is what the FSK data would have generated. Just that simple little blurb that there was a child abduction for the counties, and this is it. When you look at the CAP message that was associated with it, you can see it was substantive. It had more information about the name of the child, the car, the vehicle, the license plate number, everything around it. So again, if you're going to do this, it really is the idea of send more information that really makes sense. So the construct of trigger cap polling is don't just take what you get first. Let's find out if more actionable, and really the CAP message, as you kind of pointed out, has a lot more data that we can do. And that CAP message, as you said, could contain things like the image of the child. It could have a picture of the license plate of the vehicle or what the vehicle might look like, which kind of helps people. So the idea and the construct is really good. And it's really nice to see that the FCC has kind of moved that forward as a thing for, going forward and making it much more as part of the standard that everyone should follow this particular thing. So I'll leave it at that. Just wanted you to kind of pivot on the things that you had talked about. There is a substantive amount of information available. It may not always be there, but if there is a CAP message, if we can use it, it's going to be something that typically will contain a lot more information about the particular event.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That's a good idea. That's a good explanation there of what it's actually going to do. Harold, I know you've been involved in EAS for many, many years. And where do you see this going? Is this going to be a real big situation for the local engineer to have to tackle, or what is your thoughts on it, how to implement that?
Well, the engineer shouldn't need to do anything other than, in the case of Sage, procure and download the new software to implement that. In other cases, there may be some settings changes that need to be made. The FCC came up with a specific time target for how long you wait. But those are all sort of set and forget. At most, you need to do something, a few minutes at most, and changing your settings or installing new software, and then the system will take care of it automatically after that. It remains to be seen how effective this is going to be. Technically, there are a couple of issues. There may be some changes made. What Bill showed there, the additional information, of course, that's in the text domain. It mainly applies to TV stations with crawls, or for HD radio systems that can put some amount of text up on the screen. For radio, of course, they're just dealing with the audio. Now, getting the audio from CAP is usually a better idea. But the information for Amber Alerts, as that example gave, the audio is already available in the current system. Transferred legacy hop to hop. Now each station is pretty much guaranteed to get the better audio if it's provided along with the CAP message. The only downside, and as an engineer, I think about this right now when you're polling FEMA's IPAWS server, everybody polls, they're kind of automatically spread out. Typically you poll at a 30-second interval. It can be more, it can be less, but it's spread out. In this case, they're going to be aligned. As soon as that legacy message comes in, the FCC wants you to start a 10-second clock, and at the end of the 10 seconds, go poll for that CAP message. This could have the effect of getting hundreds of stations in big areas for statewide alerts, all banging on IPAWS at exactly the same time. That's something that hasn't happened in the past. We'll see how that works out. The other downside is you do incur an additional delay. It could be 10 seconds, but if polling everybody simultaneously ends up causing retries, you could have a longer delay. It remains to be seen what folks are going to do with that. And of course, this only applies to messages that come through CAP. The benefit only applies to messages that come through CAP. The majority of messages in the EAS system in the United States are still weather-based, and National Weather Service uses CAP for WEA. It does not use it for EAS. So the advantages are for a kind of a limited set, but an important set, and it is an overall improvement. Again, is what the engineers need to do on an ongoing basis. It'll have no impact. It's a one and done.
I know early on when they first did the using the CAP, they actually did something where they were going, they sent one of the NPTs out in both English and Spanish, and stations could set their receiver up to or their unit up to broadcast whichever one they needed for their particular station. And some of the Spanish stations were still getting it in the English version. And we discovered what the problem was. And like you say, it was the polling delay. You may have gotten something in on a legacy EAS, and the only way you could get the other version was to get it from the embedded URL in the CAP message. And so they received and transmitted the English version before the CAP message came down because of the polling rate. And that, as you say, it changes from, everybody's not polling at the same time. And so that can really be an issue. So I guess we can look at that.
Yeah, this will be an improvement for multilingual. Certainly, you won't bail out to the English default version if that's what you get on legacy. Now, the issue here, of course, is a whole nother can of worms we don't need to bring up here. But if you're monitoring a station that suddenly starts playing the Spanish messages and you're an English station, that's going to be a problem. Now, presumably that's taken care of in all the state plans. But if it isn't, this could expose some of those problems, which have simple solutions. If you want to get a legacy English message, you need to monitor a station that's guaranteed to play that in English. Same thing for Spanish. You want to, if you're a Spanish station, you want to have a backup to the legacy. If you didn't get a CAP message, then you need to monitor a Spanish chain of stations. It's all part of the multilingual can of worms in EAS that hasn't been solved yet either. But this is another tool in the quiver. It will get you that CAP message now, giving you more options as to what to do and what you want to play when.
Yeah.
I'd add one other thing too, that kind of a gotcha, because we put it into our systems back in 2018, we've seen this too. The FCC now mandates it, so it must be, it will be required as part of it. We liked the idea of being more selective. For example, if you wanted to do it as the example I showed before on a Amber Alert, that's great because you're going to look for extra content. But if it's a tornado warning, why would you want any delay? And so we originally implemented it so that it was selective. You could actually select which events used trigger cap polling and which ones did not. But now with the current rules, they eliminated that and said you have to do it. So to me, that's a little bit of not allowing a little bit of flexibility that I think is kind of important in some ways, where timing is a little bit more critical, and defaulting on the other side where the amount of information is more important.
Sure, sure. That's some good point. Really are. Jim, your system's been around for a long time. A lot of stations still use it. I see them when we, John and I go around and do an inspection. We run across the Gorman relics. And how does this sit with your system? And what are your thoughts on the FCC's requirements?
Well, we will be able to update the CAP program over the internet, and it may be required that you replace the EEPROM inside the EAS unit, but that's socketed and it's easy to pry out and replace with a new EEPROM. So we'll have that all ready in a couple of months.
Do you feel that the delay in the polling is going to cause any kind of any problems with getting the message out reliably?
Well, if the delay in the polling is required, that's what we have to do. But we don't know yet how well it's going to work out. As Bill pointed out, there could be a problem with the delay in the polling.
Sure, sure. John, yeah, I know that you're traveling around doing inspections like myself, you see a lot of situations where things are not very well secure behind a firewall, or internet problems or cybersecurity issues. You might want to talk about what you've seen out in the field, and then we can poll our guest about that as well. Hello, John.
Sorry about that, folks. I
Oh.
had to be on. Anyway, I know that the FCC is very concerned about the security aspects of it. And I think we're all painfully aware that in today's environment with a lot of unattended stations, or stations that have no studios and they're all central casting from a different location, that security is a real concern, because we've seen a number of boxes. You walk out to a transmitter site and their EAS unit is sitting in the rack with the rest of the monitoring equipment for the transmitter site, and it's very obvious that there's no firewall or any kind of security there. It's just wide open on the to the world. So I'd really there's a lot of controversy going on in reply comments right now as to whether or not the security should be enforced per the FCC proposal. Should stations be required to certify their security once yearly in Form 1? So I'd like to get some input from both Bill, Harold, and Jim on this, and how you expect to address it. Bill?
Well, we have tried repeatedly and over the course of years. In fact, even on the top of our box, when you open it up, it says, there's a big sticker that says this has to be behind a firewall. It's got to be, it's not a security appliance by itself. Get it behind a firewall, do what's right. And yet we've tried a whole bunch of different things to identify that, to help people. We've been on webinars, we've done papers on security, all kinds of stuff. And some people take and listen to it, they enact it, and those people have done the right thing. The unfortunate situation is there are those few outliers that just don't either listen, don't pay attention, and just don't do it. And unfortunately, they're the ones, if you will, they're pulling the rest of us down. They're creating these kinds of headaches. And now we've got, if you will, kind of the FCC with the camel's nose under the tent, starting to make inferences with, other things around it. And it's not without merit. I mean, again, the industry, if you will, has kind of created this thing. And as I said, some people are pulling us down. We can continue to do things on our equipment, force changes of the password, do other things. Do we put a firewall on it automatically? And then all of a sudden we change our stripes from being, an EAS encoder decoder device into be now a security appliance. And how much energy and effort do we spend in those particular things, and trying to work with people to do that? So even if we did that, those few people that don't pay attention or don't listen, and do what they should do aren't going to do it. And we're just trying to find those people trying to do things. I would kind of encourage, part of the stuff that we have is FCC doesn't have a fine mechanism for people that don't put it behind a firewall. There isn't anything, there's no teeth in that. And so therefore, I think to some degree, either their communications attorneys that they probably don't talk to or anything else like that aren't really telling these people this, there really is a reason to do this. And it's not just for the purposes of that, it's the fact that it's going to have an impact somewhere.
Harold?
Yeah, and I think a point to make, and it showed up in the comments someplace as well. The AES manufacturers ought to put a firewall in. We're not a firewall company. There are firewall companies. The nice thing about the EAS devices, I think, in general, is that they focus on doing EAS and doing it well. We don't do a lot of other stuff. There's not a processor in there. It's not a DA. It's not a whole bunch of stuff. And what it isn't is a firewall. Doing firewalls, doing them well, doing them right requires constant work, constant effort, and constant updating. And it also requires for the user to have an understanding of how to do these things using a tool that they have. So putting a firewall on an EAS device isn't necessarily going to help anything, especially because the EAS device isn't the only thing at a radio station that needs the firewall. You need to have a firewall in front of everything else you have. And we won't bore the folks with the list of what those things are, but it would, I think, probably do more harm than good by focusing on, let's put a firewall on the EAS device. No, you got to put a firewall everywhere. Now, does that mean the EAS device needs no security? Clearly not. You still have to do the security stuff. The FCC has a list of things. I can pop up the list, but let's not go into that here, of what they think needs to be done. There are certain common threads through that list of things, following various government lists of best practices and what you should do and what you shouldn't. Piggybacking along with the update to do the CAP polling, SAGE is going to add some additional audit logging type stuff. What the FCC was worried about was not necessarily people getting an alert on the air, but people attempting to get an alert on the air. Intrusion is somebody into your device that shouldn't be, is somebody who should be there doing things that they shouldn't be. We're going to beef up audit logging, for example, to give stations another tool to do things. Is it going to be automated? Is it going to identify miscreants and flog them? No, that's still a requirement of the user. But there are some tools that we can add to do that. So we're going to try and help along those lines. Is there anything that the device manufacturers can do to solve the problem? No, we can help the users do the problem. We can continue to do outreach. I think we've all got a warning in the box that says you got to be secure. As soon as you get this box, do the password thing right, look for the latest software and get a firewall. Other than going and personally installing it and then going back every day to make sure somebody didn't change it, that's the thing. There's very little we can do, but we do need to be aware of it. It is still a good idea. We need to do what we can and help users do what they need to do it.
Thank you, Harold. And it's a case of especially with the ransomware viruses that are going around the stations. It's not a case if, it's going to be when. So you have to be on alert at all times for your entire facility. Jim Gorman, your comments.
Well, CAP at least has the protection of requiring somebody to read the XML digital signature. But the EAS part of the alerting system, I don't know how safe you can make it. In certain places, like in Canada, they don't use the daisy chain. They just use the CAP part of it, where you don't poll the CAP. The CAP sends you a message. And I don't think the EAS can ever be made bulletproof for messages over the air.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Larry, I know we were talking a few minutes before we went live, but I know you did a seminar. Well, we did, I guess maybe a year or so ago, we were talking about audio levels. And I know that's a real problem that everybody faces with their boxes. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. I think it's either misunderstanding of the audio levels, but I thought you might like to talk about that a little bit.
If I could jump in real quick,
Sure.
John, just maybe something, I want to throw this out as we're still talking about the security thing. And, you know, you question why people don't do a firewall or other things like that. What I've found in our stuff is that for the most part, you get, obviously there could be a bit of laziness and not wanting to do it. But sometimes they say, hey, this unit is in a remote location. I want to be able to access it. So they just put it on the internet and they've got an IP address and they can access it. Oh, I'm a remote engineer, I can access it. I think what might be of great service, and I kind of throw this out as maybe ABA could do it, is a session on how to take a firewall and structure it such that you could gain remote access. You know, things about how to do port forwarding, a couple of other things that might be a little bit of information. As Harold pointed out, there are a whole bunch of firewall companies and have that, but there are some standardized ways in which, how do I get remote access? If I put in a firewall and I'm a contract engineer, how is it that I could gain access into it if I need to get into that particular site? And I think that would be well served to a number of different people to help them understand that. Because again, it's not our particular role or anything else, but what we found is that pushback, that's the reason that people don't put in a firewall is because I want to have remote access to it, and they don't understand by doing it that way what it opens them up to, because they just want to make it simple and be able to do it.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah,
Larry?
let me throw something out here to all three of you while we're on this subject. I know the commission and everybody else is concerned about it being sort of locked into where it doesn't have access to the outside world, where ne'er-do-wells can get into it and mess it up. But where does that, all the units, I think, that's on the market now have the ability to send emails out to an engineer showing the data that they received, and all three of you know that here in Alabama we have an FTP server where we're now monitoring like 170 different stations on an FTP. Is there any concern that having the unit send out an email or send data to a FTP site type of arrangement? Does that open up the box's security in any way? Harold, you have any thoughts on that?
Generally, outbound connections from your device don't cause a problem. Any two-way communication, or even if it's an outbound communication, somebody who can coerce you to connecting to them rather than who you think you're connecting to, it's not a good thing. Is there a big problem with sending email? No. Is there a problem with FTP? Well, use the passive method of doing FTP so that you're on a single TCP socket, and that pretty much solves those problems. Outbound information. Now there's things you can do with outbound information, things you can do with those email addresses to find out what the IP address is of the originating device, perhaps. It widens the threat surface. Is that particular thing, sending out the weekly emails, a problem? No, it is mainly getting into it to change the settings or to inject a bad alert. And as somebody pointed out, I think that IPAWS messages are digitally signed. That's why occasionally, and the next one's coming up in 2024, you have to change those certificates, the intermediate certificates inside all the devices. So we'll all need to do an update. FEMA is getting better at that, more aware of the problems caused by changing those certificates and the need for getting the whole ecosystem prepared for it and doing it as far in advance as possible. Now, they are at the mercy of higher up in the chain as well, so they can't solve all the problems, but it's certainly a lot better than it was in 2019. Everybody has learned from that, from the problem there that occurred in November 2019. But to your specific question, FTP and email, not much of a problem.
Yeah, we had wondered about that. Bill, I know your system sends emails as well. You have any thoughts on security on emails?
No, Harold's right. I mean, anytime you typically are initiating the communication from inside through, then you typically don't have those kinds of problems. We have one thing that you can do, and add a bunch of other different things. Single sign-on, where you're authenticating it through different ways and different means. So you've got a couple of different ways to do it. We have an email function that you can send if people, failed attempts. So if someone's trying to attack the thing, you can get a email saying, hey, someone is kind of coming into this thing. But again, the function of email communication is far less likely to create any kind of real security issues.
I know that John brought up something about audio levels, and we can talk about that as well. But I had I see on the chat line here, somebody was talking about the text-to-speech converter in the units. Is there has there been any move to maybe increase the intelligibility of the? I know it's not like the old Perfect Paul the weather service used to be. It's a lot better than that, but I do hear some people talk about the text-to-speech converter on the units. Bill, you might comment that.
Yeah, I mean, the standard DASDEC comes with if you will, it's a freebie text-to-speech engine. It's okay. It's got a little bit of the Muppets Swedish Chef sound to it, as far as I'm concerned, but it's there and it's available because it's just the standard. Now we do support what we call premium text-to-speech voices, where you can pick English, female, Spanish. We've got a number of different languages that we support, and you can opt to get a better. I mean, it's basically, if it's free, it's going to be only so good a quality. But if you go for one of our premium voices, it opens up a whole world of additional capabilities. Things like being able to set specific parameters for colloquial names. For example, the one I use is in Utah. There's a town, it's spelled Toole, Toole. And of course, when people look at it, they think it's Thule, and it's locally pronounced Tooele. I don't know how you get Tooele out of that spelling, but that's the colloquial name. So you can go into the premium text-to-speech and edit it so that when it sees this, and Tooele is a town and a county. So when it sees that particular spelling, it's going to phonetically spell it a certain way. You can do different things about changing the speed and everything else like that. So there are tools out there that you can do if you want to try to increase the intelligibility by leaps and bounds. Again, putting in specific spellings. We also have to recognize that I think that a lot of the people that originate the alerts are learning a little bit more about the specific ways in which to spell things so that they know that a text-to-speech engine is going to properly pronounce it. Things like 911, you put a space between the 9, the 1, and the 1. And that lets the text-to-speech engine properly pronounce it as 911 instead of 911. So there's a little bit of a yin and a yang there about if people could do a better job of preparing the messages with the idea that the endpoint is probably going to be a text-to-speech engine, you can do a better job. But you can, again, get more, more advanced speech tools available to you for doing a better job. Again, different phonemes, different ways to do it. So you can improve it, and if people would just do it, they can do it.
The issue is,
go ahead.
The issue with the text-to-speech is that nobody controls the originators. The FCC has control over our end of it, the final dissemination. They've got a stick. All that FEMA has is carrots, and their carrot bags have been empty for years. They've got no way to coerce the originators to do a better job. And the better job is pretty trivial and pretty simple if it's laid out for them to do. The important thing as cues to these text-to-speech engines is punctuation. Put commas in where commas need to go. Don't put them in where they don't need to go, and put periods in. don't use ... if you can help it. There's just a simple set of rules here. In addition to things like 9-1-1, as Bill said, there are other ones, a standard way of doing time. You can have the smartest engine in the world, and if you put in 1000p and leave out the colon, it's not going to say 10 o'clock. So that is something that needs some work, and that's one of the main reasons why we don't yet want the National Weather Service to put their stuff on EAS, because their text-to-speech, their internal text-to-speech engine, the quality of their audio now is pretty good, really, for their day-to-day messages. But that's internally massaged in their systems. The text is not. So an uninformed text-to-speech engine taking the National Weather Service text is not going to do a good job. The National Weather Service says, and they're right, EAS isn't their only customer. They call their stuff products internally, and there are other users of those products. So they can't arbitrarily start making changes. But if we want to get the NWS messages in CAP to EAS in a way that we can use that text-to-speech, some work needs to be done. Now, of course, the right thing to do is supply the audio along with the CAP message. There's no reason to require downstream devices to get as good as the Weather Service is on a device-by-device basis when the Weather Service already has the good audio. But again, their systems were designed without exposing that audio and distributing it in mind. So it's not something they can just do in an afternoon, and it's not something they can do for free. But working together, the ecosystem needs to solve that problem. In Canada, they had the same problem of pronunciation for local names and other things. The solution they made, which was a good one, is to have a central text-to-speech engine. All the CAP messages go to one place where that place does the text-to-speech. So there's one place that needs to do what Bill was describing, telling a device how to pronounce a particular local name. That's called a lexicon. You can upload lexicons to the NDEC as well, but who makes the lexicons? Canada pushed back on the quality of that text-to-speech, that we were pronouncing the names wrong. I said, give me the phoneme database for how to pronounce the names. They said, we don't have one of those. So we want me to go door to door and get a consensus on how to pronounce kilometer, kilometer. Near me, we've got a town called spelled Versailles, pronounced Versailles the world over, except here where we say Versailles. There will always be some local names. The other way, of course, is to avoid overuse of local names. The other thing they did in Canada, they came up with a set of 3,000 or so, maybe more, names that they use for weather reporting purposes. They don't try and be the local news where you want to say as many local towns as possible to make everybody feel inclusive. You just want to give a recognized landmark for your weather. So there's a lot of things that can be done, should be done. But I think all the device manufacturers agree the best thing is for an originator, if they can, to provide their own audio spoken by a human using the local dialect and local pronunciations. Text-to-speech will never be better than that. And you need a buddy who's a radio engineer who can tell you how to set up a small sound producing area in your emergency operations center. Get a decent microphone. Don't do it in the men's room, and you can come up with some pretty good audio. Anyway.
Yeah, we ran into that with the ALEA, Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, is the one that issues Amber Alerts in Alabama, and we had a lot of problem with the way they were writing their Amber Alert information, and it really sounded weird with the text-to-speech because they would not be like you were talking about the 911. That was one of the area problems, but they were using the wrong pronunciation and things ran together. So we had to really sit down and talk to them about, this is the way you got to type the message to get the message out where it can be heard clearly with a lot of intelligibility. Jim, what's your thoughts on text-to-speech?
Well, I would just add that I don't have much to add to what was previously said, but I would just add that we use the freebie text-to-speech as well. And so far, it's worked out pretty well.
There are some, I saw a comment the other day was talking about the quality that that GPS units have now. And I'm not sure what the GPS people are doing, but their quality is quite well. So I guess this is a growing thing and evolving thing from day to day to increase that. But then again, if we do this triggered cap polling, and obviously, as Bill said, everything is not going to come over cap. You still have a legacy EAS, but that will help improve it as well. John, you mentioned to talk a little bit about the audio levels, and I know each one of you have specific information in your guides that come with it on what kind of level that your device needs to see. One of the problems that I see or on our inspection is there's such a disparity in the level. First of all, between the sources, people are not leveling them out like they're supposed to be. But more than that is when an alert is issued, there's a big change in between the program level and the alert level. Is there anything you could recommend to station personnel of how to make sure it matches the program level? And Harold, we'll start with you on that.
That's another issue with lack of rules for originators. FEMA provides rules for what the format of the audio is supposed to be. MP3, preferably at such and such a sample rate and such a compression rate. What they don't say is such and such an audio level. Now, again, EAS devices are EAS devices. How much time, money, and effort did the TV industry spend on leveling advertising versus program material? The FCC passed rules. People had to spend a lot of money to make that all work out. And while it's a lot better than it was, it's still not 100%, but it's a lot better than it was. The problem is if you've got an originator who's originating at a very low level, another one originating at a very high level, then your EAS device needs to do some kind of leveling. Now we've looked at doing that. There may be some who do that. Again, not a simple thing. You get pumping and you get the noise level bumped up, and in some cases it's better, in some cases it's worse. We have a white paper on our website, as I assume the others do as well, that says here's the problem, here's how you need to tune it, here's the tools we give you to do the tuning. You can get a bouncing bar graph on the end deck that shows you where you're at and what your targets are. As far as day to day, that's what the monthly test is for. Every month there's an audio test sent out free for you to use to optimize what you're doing. It's only as good as the originators in providing that audio at some consistent level. In general, people who put their EAS device in front of their processor, the processor covers up a lot, but not all of the evils. And we haven't had as many problems as people were worried about back in 1994 when we were originally doing field trials on these things. The one advantage of EAS and the BRAP is it is fairly resilient to going through. The audio is an issue, and in some cases it's not so much the level as just the fact that you're 40 miles away trying to hear an AM station at night. Part of it is when you set up the state plan to actually listen to the local engineer who says, I can't hear that here. And the state plan says, well, you fix that, physics. And you can't. So again, it's a collaborative effort to make sure that the whole system is good end-to-end with audio. FEMA is a lot better now for the national periodic tests than they were back in 2011 when everybody first recognized the problem. It is possible to improve things. It's never going to be perfect.
What would be the procedure, and Bill, you might want to comment on this, to make sure that you match the alert audio to the program loop through audio? That's what I'm seeing in a lot of stations. They just don't match. Unmute, Bill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And you've just given, like the big thing, and I think just kind of reiterating what Harold says, you've got some ways to do it. There are tools in the different devices where, as you can loop audio and route it from the input to the output and listen to it, level set it. We have added a whole bunch of different things over the years for being able to try to pull up, low audio or push down high audio and everything else if it starts to ramp around too much. But it really, again, almost going back to the same sloppiness that we talked about, not putting firewalls in there. It takes time. It takes a little bit of engineering effort. And I think people just need to pay attention to it to get it right. It's not overly difficult. It's not something that is so difficult that requires a tremendous amount. It's just kind of that subtle little thing that allows people to do it right. And if you're sloppy, that's what happens. Is sloppy is just going to give us problems.
But again, your loop through audio from the station, whatever your plant level is, if it's 0 or +4, or whatever it happens to be, you would like the playback level inside the unit to match that. So there's not a tremendous amount of difference.
Well, and some of the things too is like you can drop in test, sweeps and other things like that to compare what the even generate a text to speech output, so you know what the output player is going to be. If it comes in as a MP3 file, to Harold's point, you're going to get some things, but there could be different ranges in the audio level of that file. So when we play it back, but you can grab those things and use it in a test loop manner where you can test the output. So there's different ways. Put in sweeps, put in route the input, radio input to the output, and see what levels they've got. Make sure your inputs are good. The tools are there, and a lot of us have got these pieces of equipment already set up to be able to do that. It's just, will people do it? If they will, it'll improve it.
Sure. I'll tell you a little funny story. When everybody went over to the new digital units, one of the calls or several calls I had, they said, wow, there's something wrong with my unit. So we just ran a weather alert and it like to blew the speakers off the wall and it's distorted. I said, what kind of level? Look on the on your EAS device, and what does the meter show? And he said, well, it's hitting 0. I said, it's hitting 0 like it's supposed to be. I said, excuse me, but this is DBFS, not DBM. And a lot of people said, what's DBFS? So that's a sort of blew some of them away.
Sadly, what seems to be a lost art is the ability to characterize your audio. A lot of times I'll say to somebody, well, put a scope on it. Are you getting square waves? Scope? Where would I get one of those?
Yeah.
And we tell a lot of folks, record your output, send it to us, and we'll tell you what's wrong. Are the levels skewed? You've got 12 dB between the high and the low. Have you got your people meter data over top of it? Is it or is it playing back at the wrong rate? People put the NDEC in front of their cough box end up with data oddly that sounds right because it's the right frequency, but the bits have been smeared as the device tries to buffer up some audio to play back. So many of these problems can be found and solved by using a free audio playback oscilloscope program on your PC and look at the data. But that's a lost art, sadly, surprisingly, in an industry that makes some coin based on having good sounding audio. So there's nothing magical about it. But to your specific question, getting the general audio that goes in the donut hole between the braps to match the general level of your playback, we've all got knobs you can tune to do it, and the NDEC specifically has a display that shows you what your levels are. And we actually calculate what the levels are going to be on another display based on what you're putting in, where your various gain stages are. There's 6 adjustments you can make basically, and as it flows through to the output, and you can get it tuned up fairly well. But it does take a little bit of time and some thought.
One of the,
I was going to say, we had a good question pop up a few minutes ago, and it's as good a time as any to throw this out at everybody. And of course, we realize that the rules haven't been finalized yet, but I know that all our representatives are working on what changes will come. And one of our attendees was questioning about when that we could expect updates to be available for installation, and which I think a lot of people are curious about and may not have been decided. But from our manufacturers, what about, is this going to be a paid update or not? Or have you decided yet as far as budgeting purposes go?
Well, let me give you the straightforward answer on that. This will be a paid update from Sage. It'll be less than the last update was. We're trying to get that in at about half of what the previous update was. There's a lot of stuff in this. There's what the SEC is requiring. There's what they're hinting at that they may require for the NPRM. Now, they're not requirements now, but as we talked before, there's still good things to do anyway. Additional the audit logging of failed login attempts, who's logged in, who's logged out, who commanded a certain operation, who canceled an outgoing alert. We're going to add all of those in as well as the current known requirements. Our goal is to get that out end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter. You're required to have it installed by December the 12th, 2023. So there's time. And we want to give users at least half a year to get scheduled to get their updates installed. It's the other thing that the FCC doesn't take into account when they do their small business plan. And here's what we think it's going to cost, and it's a nickel a station. Somebody actually has to go and do it, and not a lot of stations now. Some do, but a lot of the smaller ones don't have an engineer who's there all the time, or a part of the time, or more than once or twice a month, depending on whether it's planting season or not. So that's a cost, and we try to minimize that cost by bundling these things all together in bigger chunks rather than doing a release every couple of weeks. The intent is to save on engineering time for the smaller stations who have to hire somebody to come out and do it. They could do it on their own. We tried to make the process as simple as possible. We walk people through it on the phone, but a lot of folks say, well, our engineer is going to handle that, and he's coming in May. So but for us, there will be a charge. We're going to try and get it out early in the second quarter.
All right, thank you. Jim Gorman.
Yes, there will be a charge for the updates. But I wanted to point out one other thing about the audio levels. The other two speakers have covered it pretty well. But another thing that happens is the FCC defines what the modulation level should be for the tones, the dual tone FSK and the dual tone attention signal and the burst of FSK. And a lot of people don't pay any attention to that. And you'll have FSK levels real low and attention tones real high. And that screws up the relaying the over-the-air message as well.
All right, thank you, Jim. Bill?
Yep. So the latest updates are going to be in a version 5 release. So if you're already on version 5, there's no charge. It was an in-version update. So that's one of the big things you've got. If you're a member of our software assurance plan, which is just an annual small fee, then you'll get the updates in version 5 at no charge. If you're a previous version 4 or below, then you will have to pay the update fee to get to the latest version 5.
All right, thank you. Larry, back to you.
Oh, okay. I had one question, and I admit I'm not really sure if any of you folks, and you may do this and I'm just not aware of it. One of the problems I see out in the field sometimes, people don't know when they have lost the audio from a legacy source. I actually went to inspect a station one day and noticed that he had no audio on one of his monitor inputs. And as John knows, we're dictated by the FCC that we are not allowed to do any work for the station because it's a conflict of interest, and we understand that. But we try to help them while we're there if we can help them become compliant. So I told the engineer, I said, why don't we walk around behind the rack and just see, make sure a wire didn't break off the back of the unit or whatever. And I walked around in the back of the rack and found that the radio receiver that the guy was using for that particular source, the board op had unplugged the power to the radio and plugged in his cell phone charger. And I don't know how long that had been running that way. Now, I realize, and everybody on this call is very much aware of it, I'm sure you're supposed to review that log once a week. But we all know that that doesn't happen. I've been into stations and people say, oh, you're going to get me because I got all my notes here for the past 3 months, but I haven't been able to put them on my station log yet. So my question is the units have the capability, or can it have the capability of maybe sending a text or something like that immediately upon the loss of audio on a legacy input channel? Bill?
Well, one of the things that, and this, it gets into a lot of stuff, you have to create some level of hysteresis. I mean, how long is it just program silence or really a loss of signal? Because if you don't know or don't understand that, it's hard to do that. You have to say, okay, I want to be silent for some period of time. Then if it comes back and then it goes back. So we've looked at this at a couple of different levels to try to figure out what might work. And we did this with the CAP input too, is what constitutes a loss of signal on that, where we're not getting the information in there. So to answer your question, it is possible, but you have to kind of look at some of the things of what constitutes a loss. Over what period of time is this thing considered a loss, not just program silence? And so again, looking at that stuff and then relaying it. Right now, we don't have currently a mechanism that says, okay, send this out as an email upon the loss, but it will flag and say, we've lost audio for this period of time. With our systems, depending on whether you've got external audio feeding it or since we have tuners built into it as an option, if the tuners lose RF, that's another thing that we do. So in other words, if the antenna is broken, or they lose RF input to it, we can monitor that also as the input side of the thing and send out a message saying, hey, you've lost RF signal on this. But that is something that you can tell right off the bat that there's no input whatsoever, not a program level thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that could be sort of a long, obviously not, you wouldn't want it for 60 seconds or something, but at least you wouldn't want it to go on for a day. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, as Bill said, Sage we've looked at that as well. And the problem is you've really got to characterize what kind of station you're listening to. If you're listening to a broadcast station and it's a pretty good signal, then it's pretty easy to say, well, it probably shouldn't have been silent for 30 seconds. Pick a number. You do have to have some hysteresis in it. But if you're listening to the Weather Service, squelch noise coming up every 3 seconds or so would mess up your audio detection. Sounds like there's audio there when in fact there isn't. If you lose quality audio, if you lose decodable audio, if you're listening to a station in Santa Barbara from LA and the fog is in or the fog is out, you're going to get wildly different characteristics. You can hear it, but you're never going to decode a signal from it. So we've avoided doing that for the reason of we don't want to tell users, yeah, you've got audio, when in fact you're never going to get an alert from it. The intent is that once a week, you get a weekly test. And if you don't, you got to find out why not. The usual reason is the other side didn't send it. Not the usual reason, but the common reason for not receiving it is it wasn't sent. The downside is you got no way to find out that it wasn't sent unless you call them up and ask. There's no central database that says who has sent their alert and who hasn't. So it's not a good tool, but it's the best tool. You want to receive an alert. You just don't simply want to get audio. That said, we are looking at a way that the user can tune and turn off getting silence notifications from signals. You don't want to use it for police channels where the only thing ever sent on that channel is alerts, clearly. But you may want to do it for some AM, some FM, something where you're expected to get a good quality signal all the time. And there you are looking for somebody who kicked out the cord on it. So we're looking at doing that. Haven't done it yet.
Jim, any thoughts on that, on your equipment?
Well, everybody is supposed to look at the log once a week. And also we send emails for incoming and outgoing alerts. And it shouldn't be too many days where you could figure out you're not getting anything on that certain channel. And people are supposed to go out to look at the EAS unit once in a while, and you can easily tell whether or not you're getting audio from a station. But we don't have any automatic way of sending a message to the individuals that you're not getting RF on a particular channel.
Yeah, I think, and John, you might want to comment on this, but we were talking about this before the program actually started among us, that so many of the stations are little mom and pops and they don't have anybody to take a look at it. The EAS unit sits back in a rack somewhere, and it may go a month, you know. Well, and I'll share this story with you. I actually went to a place one time that they put it in like however many years ago when the new digital came out, and they had not done anything since that time. They only had one source working. The other one didn't have any audio on it at all. And his software was like 10 years old. He said, no, we put it in and it's been working, so we haven't really paid attention to it. A 0 station log, by the way. So yeah, you're correct that we're supposed to be, engineers are supposed to be checking that, or the chief operator is, once every week, but we know, John and I know that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a real problem, but you know, at the same time, you find probably those stations that don't know what's going on with their EAS unit have not spent the money for a silent sense alarm for their main audio signal, because it goes off and nobody knows until somebody shows up the next morning at whatever time. And I guess it's the economy of broadcasting. Larry, I know we
Just
got.
one second.
Oh,
Somebody
sure.
did ask on the chat here, a feature to alert the user test has not been received. The NDEC does have what we call the conformancy report. It's a button you need to click on the report page. In the new alert, the new release coming out, we do intend to email that out to you once a week. So you will get a reminder at least once a week that you haven't received alerts on channels that you expect to receive the alerts on. So we are doing that next time as well.
All right, thank you,
Sorry,
Harold.
John.
Oh, no problem. I know we're at the top of the hour, and guess now would be a good time, Larry, to get the thoughts on the future of EAS from each one of our panelists today. Harold, you just spoke, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I did give some thought to that, and who knows what's coming in the future. But I asked the people, remember what the main reason for EAS is. The main reason for EAS is the emergency action notification. FEMA, as part of their continuity of government role, it's all to make sure that this is a belt and suspenders thing, back up to the backup to the backup on a very bad day when the internet is down. So the future of EAS, should we want to maintain that capability, can't go all to the internet, can't be all in the cloud, can't be all of that, because we still want the capability to get this ad hoc network of AM stations doing relays to get to some portion, hopefully all, of the US citizens in time of need. And my definition for time of need has always been when you wake up and everybody's internet is down, that's going to be a bad day. So regardless of what the future holds, we do have this legacy stuff. It is sometimes a pain to haul that legacy around behind us, but it's there for a reason, and we need to periodically reassess, is that reason still valid? And if so, we need to keep all that stuff along with the new future stuff. That's my thought.
All right, thank you. Jim Gorman.
I agree with Harold.
Well, that made it easy. Bill, you're going to be a simplistic.
No, I probably people would say, yeah, I wish I was that thing, but I'll add a little bit more. I think Harold's spot on. And part of the stuff around it is we need to look at and recognize this over-the-air component is critical. That relay and that capability is important. Now, the scope of that relay, could it be augmented with other things, like being able to do additional data services either through subcarrier types of things on radio things, or perhaps data channels using things like ATSC1 or ATSC3, being able to again use an over-the-air mechanism that doesn't rely wholly on an internet-based capability and functionality. I also would probably kind of, and I probably will get rocks thrown at me, maybe just through the comments or like, I seriously think that we should be testing this thing more frequently. The NPT is capable of being tested regionally, which was actually when it first got tested was on a regional basis rather than just a national basis. But the idea that we've got this, worst case scenario, as Harold points out, and yet we only test it once a year, only to find out to the large part of it, even at the originating points, is where the primary failures are. It never made it to the PEP station, or the bridge failed in some way, shape, or form. Part of that is people would go, oh man, I don't want to do that, because the FCC has been so onerous in having to do the ETRS forms and all of the stuff that has to go along with it. But to me, in an engineering thing, you test and you test and you test, and that's the whole thing. And the only way you can really dial in and get it working right is you have to iterate through multiple tests. And once a year, to me, is just an insufficient number of testing cycles to fix some of the things at the very top, at the first part of the chain, before we can do anything else. So I kind of encourage the fact that we should be doing more testing. Like I said, I know because of the ETRS requirements, it's pretty difficult. But maybe if we looked at some way, through those agencies, to relax it, or do some regionalized NPTs, we can get to the bottom of some of these initial problems and create exactly what it's supposed to be, a more resilient over-the-air method for communicating to people.
That's a very good idea. And we do, as most of you know, we actually have a GSS satellite system in operation in Alabama. We have close to 50 downlinks now, and we do 2 tests a month, just strictly on the satellite system itself. And I can see how many of make sure that all our receivers are working. So, and that goes true for anything that somebody has at a broadcast station. You need to test stuff, backup transmitters, everything else. There's no good reason to have it if you don't test it to make sure that this works. That's a good point, Bill, that you brought up. John, you have anything else you want to share before we close out?
No, I really appreciate Bill and Jim and Harold all being with us this morning, because this was a very thorough meeting, and also a very learning experience for us. And I think we're all on the same page as what we need to do to deal with EAS, and we all seem to agree on the problems that EAS has. And I'm not sure we'll be able to fix some of the problems because they're out of our hands, but equipment side, I know you guys have a good handle on it. So again, I appreciate your time being with us today. Larry?
Yes, I'm here, and want to offer my thanks to you folks as well. And remind everybody that our next engineering webinar will actually not be on the third Tuesday that we normally have them on. It'll be on the 4th, February 28th. We actually have an engineering academy class that particular week, when we would normally run the webinar. So we're going to move it to the next Tuesday, which will be February 28th. So mark your calendar for that. Thank everybody for joining, and especially to our guests, Bill, Harold, and Jim, for their input. And we'll see you next week at our next next month, not next week, but next month, for our next engineering webinar. Thanks everyone, and see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Bye-bye.